Yeah, so building a technology-enabled end-to-end supply chain, very important. The reason ShipBob has been so successful is really making everything very streamlined and automatic. So you guys can focus on building your brand, and we just do the fulfillment, as well as Flexport is a very tech-enabled platform as well. So just combining the two gives you visibility into what's going on in your supply chain without you having to actually physically be there. Because you're not driving the boat, you're not moving the inventory, you're not in the fulfillment centers, and we get it. So our speakers, I'm Francesca DeCastris. I am the partner manager for logistics and supply chain at ShipBob. I have John Oates with me. He's the solutions consultant at ShipBob. And then Ted, senior director and general manager of S&B at Flexport. So we're going to talk about today, global ocean freight challenges, how e-commerce brands are responding to them, optimizing inventory transport from manufacturing hubs to the US, which has also been a pain point as of recently, strategic distribution and last mile omni-channel fulfillment, and then a panel discussion. So if you have any questions throughout, just feel free to throw them in the general or in the Q&A. If they're going along with the slides, we'll ask them in the moment, or we'll keep them to the end and answer them at the end. So feel free to pop in any questions. So just to give an overview about ShipBob, we are a tech-enabled 3PL. We've recently gone more omni-channel, understanding that your customers are not all just shopping from your website. They're shopping from different channels, different marketplaces, Walmart, Target, just different places versus just being on your website. So a little background on us: we have 30 plus global fulfillment centers. US, Canada, EU, UK, and Australia. We actually just launched another Canadian fulfillment center as of recently. So now there is more opportunities. There's 2 locations in Canada, so you distribute your inventory. We have integrated marketplaces and direct integrations built in for like your website, like Shopify, WooCommerce, BigCommerce, Walmart, eBay. We also are able to do B2B fulfillment and retail drop shipping. This is a new thing. A new feature that we brought on as of recently. And like I said, your customers aren't all shopping on your websites all the time. Maybe they're shopping from Amazon. Maybe they're shopping from Target.com, Ulta.com, Nordstrom.com. We're able to process those orders through their website and send them direct to consumer without them ever having touching the inventory, as well as sending inventory to these retailers. Because if some of your consumers are like me, I still like going into the store to buy stuff. I don't think I'll ever stop doing that. I do buy a lot of stuff online, but there's some people that, based on convenience, maybe you have to buy something last minute for a vacation. I am that person in the store doing same day pickup at Ulta or Target. We also offer custom packaging options and gift notes, driving that brand experience. That's one of our differentiators. And then there's 100% coverage for 2-day in the US. So by using our network of fulfillment centers, there's 20 plus in the US, you can strategically place your inventory, which we'll go into a little bit later, so you can offer faster shipping times to more of your customers. And our fulfillment is carbon neutral. We've partnered with Pashama to offset our carbon emissions produced in our warehouses and for the shipments themselves. And I'll pass it over to Ted to give an overview on Flexport.
Thanks, Fran, and hello, everybody. It's really a pleasure to join you all today. We're going to talk about the partnership between ShipBob and Flexport and how both companies are really driving towards that technology-enabled supply chain. We're also, just a little sneak preview, going to talk about how we're helping joint customers too. So you'll find out later in the presentation how we helped customers move inventory from China to the US in 15 days via ocean, which is a crazy stat. I think everybody on the call has probably experienced much longer timelines than that. So I won't get into the details right now, but we will share later in the presentation how our joint customers are doing that and how you can do it too. By way of introduction, though, I'm Ted Baglin. I lead small, medium business for Flexport. And basically my job is to help e-commerce companies grow and profit using Flexport's tech platform, logistics infrastructure, and expertise. The way that I like to think about it is that we give small businesses, startups, e-com companies the same tools that Fortune 500 companies use to manage their supply chain. You can kind of think of it as best team, best tech, best logistics infrastructure is what we want to bring to bear for all of you. And on the slide, you can see how that manifests. So these are different components of the solution that we bring forward for the client, but it's really based on your needs. So we like to think of ourselves as the platform for global trade. but we can hit the next slide. So
we have a poll.
Yeah, we're gonna go through a poll, and we'd love to get feedback from the audience here. This will help inform some of the things that we focus on later in the conversation. But what we want to know from those on the call is what's most valuable to you right now in managing your supply chain. And you can see a couple different options that are listed. So if you could actually go participate in that poll, and then we'll get some real-time results back that we can share with the group and use to guide the conversation.
Yeah, you can use the QR code. It'll take you to the Slido website, or go to slido.com, put in that code 790343. And once you're in there, it'll ask you what's most valuable to you. This one you can do multiple choice, and then just hit submit, and then we'll have live real-time data of what you guys are voting on. So we'll give you guys a second to do that. Okay, we got 4 people voting. Okay, it's shifting. No one's done reduce inventory holding costs. Oh, someone has. There's definitely a lot of these that are probably most pertinent to your business right now, or depending on seasonality or what's going on in the world. So feel free to click any of them that are very important to you, because I know it's not always just one.
So this is fascinating. It's actually right in line with some of the things that we're going to be talking about on these next couple slides, but very clearly a cost focus is coming out, and then transit times look to be the next most important area. We'll let everybody else continue to do that in the background, but Fran, maybe we can dive into the next couple slides that talk about transportation costs, transit time, and sort of current status of the ocean freight market. Okay, so I think one of the key questions is, like, why did Flexport and ShipBob come together to form a partnership? And I think that the simplest answer to that is we saw an opportunity to create value for our joint customers. I mean, you all know the story of the past couple years. The pandemic happened, and when you combine that with financial stimulus, it really started to change the consumer spending patterns across North America and other geographies. That led to record demand for goods. So our spend on services dropped and our spend on goods increased greatly. That created record demand for space on ships, planes, trains, trucks, and warehouse floors, which created a supply and labor constraint, which created congestion, bottlenecks, and very pertinent to the last slide, also it created record high prices. And so these next couple slides are going to show us how bad it actually is and how bad it got and what some of these trends look like. And we're going to be specifically zooming into the global ocean freight market. And really what this is going to help us do is explain why we've chosen to partner together and work on joint solutions for customers. So first, let's look at ocean timeliness. And so what this chart shows you is the time that it takes from cargo ready date at your factory, your supplier's location, to destination port departure. And it shows you this on 2 of the largest trades in the world, Trans-Pacific and Far East westbound. And so you can see the trend sort of starting pre-pandemic and what it looks like today. And I mean, I think it's easy to interpret this chart. It's become such a long lead time for you all as importers to figure out what orders you should place and when they will arrive so that you can fulfill for your customers. So this chart does a really good job showing how that has changed and just how painful it's become. And really this creates 2 big problems for all of you. The first one is that longer time frames means that it's actually higher variance as well. So it's not just that it takes longer, but there's more opportunity for exception and variance along that time. So it becomes harder to predict with any accuracy when goods will arrive. And then the second thing that it does is it makes it much harder for you to forecast. Whereas in the old world, you only had to forecast with, call it, 60 days of accuracy. Now you have to forecast with 115 days of accuracy. So all the old models that we had for predicting desired inventory levels against sales and marketing campaigns, things like that, have become strained, and accuracy of prediction over almost double the time horizon is always going to get worse. And so that's really difficult because you have to make this choice between potentially running out of stock and losing sales, or the risk of carrying excess inventory, which is a really hard trade-off, especially for small businesses. So let's look at the next slide, which is going to talk about prices. And so on this slide, what you can see is the actual cost to move a 40-foot container on some of the primary trades as well. And so what we saw was when demand spikes and when supply stays relatively constant, you see this increased price pressure. So whereas it used to be possible to move a container for $2,000, we were hitting peaks of $20,000. And I think you all saw that clearly came through on the poll, that everybody's very focused on how we reduce costs in this entire equation. And again, this causes problems for you. The problem is it's difficult to price your product now. You're faced with this choice of, do I pass along these costs to my customers, or do you lose margin? It's also difficult to give guidance to your investors, finance teams, or other stakeholders about what your freight spend will be for the upcoming quarter or year. Some customers that we're talking to are having to face decisions about canceling low margin SKUs, or changing their sourcing patterns to source from closer locations that can avoid expensive ocean or air freight legs. So these are all very difficult decisions that our customers were facing. And then the last one is it's been very hard to give good feedback on how long these conditions will last. And so if we could tell you perfectly, we would. But on the next slide, what we're going to show you is some of the factors to consider and some of the things that are going to influence whether these lead times stay so long and whether price remains elevated. So when we're looking at if this will continue into the future, we really look at a couple things. And the first one is that we look at consumer demand. As long as consumer demand stays high, we're likely to remain in conditions similar to this. And so that's really the first domino that you want to look at in this complex ecosystem that is global logistics, is consumer demand. And if it stays really high, which we think it will for a little while, then we're likely to continue to have these scenarios play out for timeliness and price. But when we start to see consumer demand soften, that's when things are going to start getting really interesting, because there are other factors that are going to come into play there. The ideal would be if consumer demand started to fall, then we would start to benefit from faster transit times and lower prices, because you'd have better balance between demand and supply. But there are some things that we do see on the horizon that will potentially reduce supply. The nearest term effect is going to be the union negotiations on the US West Coast. So the ILWU is entering labor negotiations. And in the past, that has disrupted supply through West Coast ports. And if West Coast ports get disrupted in the US, everything is disrupted. So depending on how those negotiations goes, that can affect supply through our ecosystem. The next is the IMO regulations. So this is regulations that affect the ocean carriers. They need to adopt greener standards. And so that's going to pull some supply out of the market while ships are retrofitted or changed to comply with IMO. And it's possible that if demand starts to soften, ocean carriers would adhere to IMO regulations early, like pull supply out earlier than necessary. The other thing that ocean carriers can do is blank sailings to keep supply under demand. That's something that they have used strategically over the course of the past couple of years and could continue. But on the positive side, in time, market forces come to bear. And so, there have been strong carrier order books for increased supply and capacity. We expect that to hit sort of in 2023 and 2024, which will add much needed capacity into the market. But moderating our excitement there is some of the risk on inputs to those order books. Things like the supply of steel is a concern today for that. So when you take all of this into effect, we do forecast these current conditions to remain for 2022 and potentially even into 2023, which makes it very, very important for you to work with companies like ShipBob or Flexport, who are thinking about ways to mitigate the impact of all of this for you, your customers. And so, what we're going to talk about next is really what are we doing as two companies to help you. And the next slide is going to talk about what things we think you should be considering as you're facing this situation. So the first is really trying to dial in your forecasting and inventory planning. So when we talk to brands and when we get feedback from partners, the majority are saying that procuring and managing inventory is their top challenge for the next year. And then really the next three categories are about using data to inform your supply chain decisions, whether that's optimizing order routing, changing your mode mix between air and ocean, or FCL and LCL, or looking at new providers who are more data enabled. So I think I'm seeing a lot of customers look at 3PL and fulfillment providers like ShipBob that have a platform, structured data, and allow them to make better decision making. So these are all ways that we're seeing brands respond. And from here, I'm going to hand it off to John, who's going to talk a little bit about how Flexport and ShipBob are coming together with solutions to solve these challenges that we just walked through and that you all are feeling.
Yeah, thank you, Ted. And so happy everybody was able to tune in and join us today. Really excited to talk about this solution that we started this last year. We call it Freightbob. Really what it is it's a solution that Flexport has called Flow Direct. And we do this in conjunction with ShipBob Assistance, right? So there's two parts of the solution. One is the program that Flexport has that allows you to get your inventory from China to the US quicker. And the second part of it is, once it gets to the US, what do we do at ShipBob to help you get this inventory from the port to our fulfillment centers, to our entire network, and hopefully enable distributed inventory for you. So I'm going to get into that in a minute, but I think we have a poll first. Fran, do you want to go to the next slide? So what we'd like you to do is, again, scan that QR code, go to slido.com and input that number, however you want to do it. But we want to know what the average lead time of getting your inventory from your manufacturer to your warehouse or 3PL for fulfillment is. So some of you guys might not know. I know I've talked to merchants in the past who, hey, my manufacturer takes care of that and we don't really track it. But we just like to know how long it's currently taking you. I know I've heard horror stories up to 6 months, but I'd love to know just on average, how long it takes to get inventory from your manufacturer to your warehouse or 3PL. And while you're doing that, I could do a little bit more of an extended introduction. So again, my name is John Oates. I am the head of the Solutions Consulting Department here at ShipBob. So this is a newer department that we have that started up on the partnerships team this last year. And our role is to basically work with merchants and work with partners on different value add solutions that we have here at ShipBob. So this encompasses our Flexport/Freightbob program. This also encompasses, we have DDP program that we launch, our B2B program, and Walmart as well. So our role is just work with merchants who have different needs that ShipBob by ourselves we don't necessarily cover to come up with sort of better together solutions. So it looks like we're getting a couple answers here, 60 plus days. That's really interesting. I'm surprised that we have so many of those. So I was recently talking to someone and, they're quoting 45-ish days, which I thought was kind of on average, but seeing 60 plus days to this extent is very surprising. Wouldn't you say, Ted?
Honestly, it fits with the data. We've seen on that slide prior just how long it's taking. So I'm not surprised at all seeing so many 60 plus days. I guess it's possible that some people are also using air freight in here or other modes that are faster. And so probably a mix of strategies and methods, but 60 plus is not surprising at all. And I'm also not surprised to see, I have no idea, just with as much volatility and variance. It's just becoming harder and harder for companies to answer that question with a high degree of certainty. Another reason why you should be using a platform that just gives you that data with a simple report or query versus having to guess at it or just look at your most recent shipments and assume that carries forward.
Right. Yeah. And I think this goes into one of the reasons why we created this program was we discovered that merchants oftentimes, this is something that merchants don't really want to deal with, right? Ocean freight and getting freight from your manufacturer is something that you're like, well, I'm not an expert in this area, right? I don't have a supply chain manager This is something that I just want someone else to take care of for me. And so with us being a 3PL, with you guys being more of a, managed transportation service, I think it makes sense to offer this service to merchants who really don't have the expertise to do this and frankly don't want to deal with it, right? So I think totally, I have no idea, fits in with our target customer profile of let us handle it for you. All right, Fran, if you want to go to the next slide. All right, so I'm going to talk about now is the typical LCL process. So if any of you don't know, LCL just means less than container load. So whenever you're shipping across the ocean, there's a couple methods. There's obviously air freight, which we've seen customers use often, but it is a little bit more expensive. There's LCL, which is less container load, and there's FCL, which is full container load. So the processes are all a little bit different, but we're going to target today is the LCL process. So typically you get your freight to one of the port cities like Shanghai, and it goes on a container, right? So as soon as this leaves, you're looking at around 14 days to cross the Pacific Ocean. So this is assuming you're going from like Shanghai to Los Angeles, Port of Long Beach, right? But then once it gets there, we've got a couple of things that happen. So right now there's a huge backlog of ships off Port of Long Beach. If you've been living under a rock for a while and you didn't know that, I think last I heard there was 50 some ships. I've heard it get as high as like 80 some ships just sitting there waiting to be offloaded, right? So this alone has caused real problems for our merchants getting freight from China to the US. And it's something that we address with this program. But just to put it into perspective for you, we're looking at around 14 days across the ocean, then it sits there for a week or longer. And then it goes through this process called deconsolidation. So for LCL, you gotta remember that you're shipping product in a container with a bunch of different merchants. So that freight could be going to Cleveland, Ohio. It could be going to Chicago. It could be going to a number of different places, right? So what they have to do once it gets to port is take this off, and somebody has to open up this container, take all the freight out, and decide what has to go where, right? So that's deconsolidation. And when we started this program, our whole goal was to eliminate this step, because what we found out was, hey, by working with a forwarder and a 3PL, where we have a lot of density going to these areas, we can eliminate this whole step, right? So that's kind of how this started out, and it's really morphed into something even bigger. So but I want to show this as a visualization to show like we're talking 30 days total at a minimum. Of course, that last slide shows a lot of merchants are waiting 60 plus days to get their freight, but this is the typical LCL process. So Fran, if you want to go to the next slide. So here's what we've got with Freightbob. So through Flexports Flow Direct solution, we use a specific carrier called Matson. So Matson crosses the ocean a little bit faster. We're looking around 10 to 11 days to cross Pacific. And then here's where it really gets interesting. So we're saving a couple days on the water, but the real benefit of using that specific carrier that I just mentioned is they have a dedicated terminal at Port of Long Beach. So what I just mentioned, that whole chaos of ships just waiting off Port of Long Beach to be offloaded, we eliminate that because we have a dedicated terminal and we can offload that cargo and have next day availability. So this is huge, right? We're seeing ships just sit there for weeks on end. And by going this route, we're able to bypass all of that and get your freight to you quicker. In addition, what we did I mentioned our whole goal is to skip deconsolidation, and we did that in this program. What we're actually doing is we're pre-consolidating loads. So what Flexport came to us and said is, hey, you guys have a lot of merchants coming to your facilities that are shipping freight from China. What if we just had these shared containers, right? So basically give us merchants that are all going to your fulfillment centers. We'll fill our containers with their freight. And then once it gets to the port, we don't have to do deconsolidation. We can just take that container, put it on chassis, and send it directly to one of your fulfillment centers. And that's exactly what we did. So all of those, chaotic, long process steps that you saw in the last slide, we're eliminating. So we've created what is essentially the most streamlined process that we could possibly have. Where basically we have these loads that are pre-consolidated. It's on a specific sailing schedule. So we have loads that are leaving every 2 weeks. In the future, we want to do every single week, right? So it's it's a pre-designated sailing schedule. We book you, you get your freight onto these containers. It crosses the ocean in as little as 10 or 11 days. And then, next day availability when it gets there, and it goes directly to one of our FCs. So this is the first part of the solution. This is where we really worked with Flexport, and they kind of own this portion. So if you're looking at what does ShipBob do versus what Flexport does, this is the portion that they own, along with us working with them on merchants who could be good candidates.
Well, and John, really quickly, like a couple of the things to key in on here too. It's like the key value for the merchant in this equation is that you are getting guaranteed container space. So there's no waiting to get an SO, going back and forth. What Flexport does is we run it like it's a bus schedule. You have the container leaving at a set time each week, you know the service string, and so we're able to operate it like a fixed schedule. And because it's all ShipBob merchants going to the same fulfillment centers, we get to move that container intact. So saving that time, making it quicker and more predictable. So the guarantee, faster, more predictable. We're addressing those challenges that we talked about on that first timeliness slide. Okay, so we're saying turn that chaotic, long world into something that's really easy to understand and that you can plan against, crucially. And because there's less handling, the cargo is not touched as many times. It's not opening the container, deconsolidating. There's also fewer shipping delays, fewer exceptions, and complications to deal with. And then the other great part about this is we've made the pricing simple and transparent. So we've actually just said it's a flat per CBM rate, door to door. So it's a great value prop. And when you look at it, it's actually substantially less expensive. And what you would see in a normal LCL move, it's much more comparable to what you would see on an FCL shipment in terms of dollars per cube. And because it's so fast and so predictable, it means you can avoid that dangerous trade of saying, ocean's too chaotic, I'm going to move this to an air shipment. So what we've seen a lot of customers do is say, hey, this is actually consistent and predictable enough that I don't need to leverage air freight. I can use this for my orders and get a very fast delivery time with low variance and high confidence. So it's really given this this solution to the problems that we outlined earlier in the presentation. And I just saw a question, is this for LCL only? It is for LCL only. I mean, if you had enough goods to fill a full container, again, it's still moving intact, right? So it doesn't have that, it doesn't have the deconsolidation step anyway. So this is an LCL focused program.
Right. And one thing I would just want to mention there, Ted, and I know we've talked about this, but one of our big bets with this program was that we would actually drive volume from FCL movements to LCL. So a lot of times what we see is that there's a lot of FCL shippers that are doing like, kind of saving up inventory for a while so they can hit the FCL volume. And it's not really an efficient way to do it. Number one, you're going to have higher inventory storage costs because you're shipping everything over in bulk. And then what happens? It just sits there, right? A lot of other times you're over ordering, so you have higher inventory investment during that time. And sometimes you're not even really doing full containers. You might be doing 90% of a container and shipping it FCL still, right? So one of our big bets was that a lot of merchants who are doing full containers are now going to start doing LCL more often. So instead of ordering a full container every 3 to 6 months, now you're doing LCL shipments every month, right?
Exactly.
So,
right.
and once companies really start to embrace that, you're going to see more even distribution of inventory. So, you're going to see more, instead of getting really stocked up and that inventory starts to come down, it's going to be more level.
That's exactly right. And another pro tip is that suppliers love it because you're not letting inventory sit on their factory floor, which has been a huge pain point for suppliers over time. So they want to get that freight moving, and this allows them to do that, even if it's not sufficient to fill a 40 or a 20. So it's a really interesting program to satisfy that need.
Yeah, and I'll share a horror story since we're talking about this. I talked to one merchant who they had so many issues last year just with like supply chain and ocean freight that they placed an order for the entire year. So to me, that's kind of insane. Like I understand why they did it, but they had literally an entire year's worth of supplies being shipped into the US. And then they had to schedule like a special warehouse where this would just sit. And now they have to do, inventory movements there, inventory movements back to their main FC. And it just seems like a huge mess to me, right? So this is a way that we can keep merchants from doing kind of, super extreme things like that, and instead have more of an even inventory replenishment strategy. All right, Fran, do you want to go on to the next slide here? So here's just a testimonial that I'd like to share. This is from one of our pilot candidates last year who utilized this service. And this went really well. I believe the shipment delivered in either 15 or 17 days. So I want to kind of highlight that because I skipped over it earlier, but we've seen great success with this program. A lot of folks come to us and they're like, how can you get it there so quickly? But we have the results, right? So we got containers from Shanghai to one of our FCs in Los Angeles in as little as 15 days last year. 17 days was the other one, right? So this merchant in particular, just had a great experience, beat the average freight time that it's taken to move something from Asia to our warehouse in LA by at least 50%. So with these the merchants who were talking about it taking over 60 days to get freight into the US, I mean, we're talking substantial time savings here, right? And plus, another thing I want to highlight is just less stress, right? Again, you guys don't really want to worry about ocean freight. You let somebody else worry about that with a program like this. All right, go ahead, Fran. Okay, so here's where I'm going to get into what ShipBob does in this. So this is a joint program, right? One of the things that's really special about programs like this is it can't exist independently of the two companies. So this really is a testament to how ShipBob and Flexport have come together to create sort of a better together solution, right? And so what we do, aside from connecting the merchants with Flexport, is once it gets to the US, what do we do with that inventory, right? A lot of our merchants have multiple fulfillment centers. If we're just getting it to Los Angeles to one of our FCs, it really doesn't do much for them, right? Because now they have to handle it from Los Angeles to wherever it needs to go. So to do this, we created another solution called cross-docking. And this is kind of a self-explanatory solution, right? All we're doing is really taking the freight that comes in from Freightbob or Flexport, and we're taking out of a container and then putting it into another container to be shipped elsewhere. So it's a really simple solution, but what it actually does is it saves you a ton of time, right? Because in the past, and most 3PLs operate this way, you have to receive inventory in. There's an SLA for receiving goods. You have to put it into stock. So somebody has to physically put it into an inventory location. And then you have to do an order to send it somewhere else. So this can take a week or longer in a lot of cases. And so what we do here is cross-docking. So we can have this inventory hit our FC and by the next day have it on a truck going somewhere else. So the effect of this is, we can have this inventory from Freightbob hit one of our FCs in, let's say, 17 days. And on day 18, it's on a truck going to Chicago. It's on a truck going to Atlanta. It's on a truck going to Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And so, this really shortens the timeline up even more because we know ocean freight doesn't exist in the vacuum. So this is what we do to help answer that question. All right, go ahead, Fran. And then the other thing that we're piloting now is inventory placement. So this is a new solution at ShipBob. We're basically looking at what your optimal fulfillment strategy should be. So this is something where you might say, hey, ShipBob, we've got, let's say, half a container of goods coming in. And here's the breakdown. It's SKU A, B, and C. And so what we do is we take that information and we look at your historical distribution. So let's say you've been shipping with us for 6 months, right? And we see, man, you've got a lot of customers on the East Coast. You've got a lot in Texas. You've got a lot on the West Coast. We might come back to you and say, hey, you should put 40% of this on the East Coast, 20% in Texas, 30% on the West Coast, however that breaks down. I'm sure that didn't equal 100%. But we give you the recommendations, right? So this is kind of a managed supply chain service, and we're doing everything from handling this freight once it gets to the US to telling you what should go where. And why this is important is when you're looking at a multi-fulfillment center strategy, number one, it reduces your time in transit and costs, right? So if you can position that inventory closer to your consumer, you're going to see your 3PL and fulfillment bill coming down, and you're going to see your time in transit coming down. So now maybe you get to a situation where you can ship via like ground methods and execute a 2-day strategy, which is the ultimate goal of this program. So, we have our, we like to tout that we can hit the entire US in 2 days. But what if we had you in 5 FCs or 4 FCs and you could do that on yourself just naturally, right? So that's really what we're trying to enable this program, but it takes a lot of the onus off the merchant and reduces that cost and transit time. All right, Fran, go ahead. And so this is just kind of a value proposition slide for ShipBob. We're looking at omnichannel fulfillment, like Fran said. So what we see now are merchants are not just selling on their own website, right? Fran mentioned they're selling through brick and mortar, they're selling through Amazon, they're selling through Square, and they're selling to different marketplaces, Walmart, Amazon, they're selling to B2B. Some of our merchants sell directly to Walmart, Nordstrom, Amazon even, Dick's Sporting Goods are some of the retailers that we fulfill to. So we can do B2B fulfillment to store or to fulfillment center. as well as drop shipping. So you basically list your products on, let's say Dick's Sporting Goods website, and every time an order comes in, we fulfill it for you and it goes to to the end consumer, right? So we've really got you covered from end to end as a supply chain service. So between getting your inventory from the manufacturer and getting it distributed to your fulfillment centers, all the way to the end customer and your retailers. I see a question here from Fernando. How's the cargo? How's it shipped for inventory placement? So Fernando, basically we're sending this through LTL typically, right? Unless you have a full truckload that we can move. But we set this up through our carriers so that you don't have to go through and work with different trucking companies as well. So we'll handle the entire thing for you. All right, Fran.
Yeah, so if you guys are interested in learning, I'll link this link about the Freightbob program powered by Flexport. I'll link it in here. Just fill out the information and John and his team will be in touch. And so the ideal merchant profile is you're currently already shipping inventory over from China, air freight, LCL, FCL shipments from China to the US. They're palletized goods or approved for palletization, no dangerous goods, cotton from China or other potential customs risks. If you have any questions, obviously just put it into the quote page and then we'll address them at that time. But I linked it in here as well if you guys have any questions about the program.
Yeah, and one comment also broadly, some people probably are listening to this and saying that's exactly what I need. Other people are going, oh gosh, it doesn't quite fit my exact need. But I think what I would also say to that is, are the partners you're working with bringing you ideas like this? Are they trying to find better together stories across your entire supply chain partners? And if no, fill out the form anyway and just talk to us, because even if this might not be a fit, we're not done innovating on solutions that can help our joint customers. So reach out, have a conversation, or even if you're just struggling and we didn't hit your exact topic today, that's okay too. We're happy to talk to you and see if we can help or have ideas for your particular situation. So just because you don't fit this ideal merchant profile doesn't mean you shouldn't talk to us. We're happy to do some supply chain therapy if that's what you need, and start a conversation about this program or other ways that Flexport or ShipBob can help you.
Okay, we're going to kick off the Q&A. So if you have any questions, put it in general or the Q&A section. Bridget, I think that's how you say your name. It's spelled a little different, but Bridget asked, I don't know if this is relevant. I want to pre-sell my products. It'd be possible to coordinate delivery afterwards with ShipBob. I'll cover this. Yes, we work with a lot of Kickstarters and brands just starting out, and some people do pre-sales or launches. You could just sell it on your website and then give us the CSV file to upload into our warehouse management system. That's how most Kickstarters and like pre-launch brands start out. So obviously we want to move you over to being automatic and your orders being pulled in from your website or marketplaces. But if you're just starting out and you kind of want to test the market and pre-sell, we can do that at a later date. Let's see, any questions, just pop them in.
Yeah, and while we're doing that, I'll just talk about some of the successes that we've had with this program so far. So I shared the testimonial from one of our merchants who was, got the product here and, improved their transit time by 50%, and was super happy, right? That's something that's been echoed with every single merchant that's utilized the service. And so I think the big things, like I mentioned, are just, they don't have to worry about it anymore, right? We go from having a headache of trying to arrange freight or having your manufacturer do it for you. Things are missing, you're losing out on sales, right? What does that do for your business, right? You see all these out of stocks, you've got customers that are coming to your website and leaving because something is out of stock, or you sell it to them anyways, and then they have a terrible delivery experience. So this is a solution. If you look at like the problems that this solution is tailored towards solving, it's that, let's keep your customers around because you have product in stock and we can fulfill it quickly. Let's make life easier for you on the supply chain side, so you can focus on what you're really good at, which is selling your products and connecting with your customer base.
Good call out, John. A question we had is, what if the sailing schedule doesn't align with my ready date of my inventory?
Yeah, that's not a problem at all. I mean, so again, we publish a sailing schedule. And so if you're a near miss, we'll just ask you your preference. You could always delay a day or two and catch the container that's leaving. Or we could also just handle it through a traditional move, whether that's air freight, LCL, FCL. So we give you ultimate flexibility to decide if you want to hop on the bus and take that joint ride straight to the ShipBob fulfillment center, or if you want to do a more traditional air freight, FCL, or LCL move. Flexport can help you with that no matter what.
Cool. Another question: do I need to be a ShipBob client to utilize this program?
So I'll take that one. The answer is yes. So we launched this program in part because we really want merchants to utilize our platform and utilize the services that we have with our partners, right? So if this is something that you don't have with your current provider, you're fulfilling out of your own warehouse, let's talk, because we have multiple options, right? We can fulfill your inventory for you in one of our FCs, and we also have another product that allows you to fulfill using our shipping carriers, our different, like our WMS, out of your own warehouse. So if you're self-fulfilling, we can help you. If you're fulfilling through another 3PL and it's not meeting your needs, we can also help you. So I'd love to have a conversation about that.
Yep. Use the link to go through Freightbob powered by Flexport, and we can address fulfillment as well, besides the managed freight program. Another question: are there any volume minimums or maximums for the service? If so, what are the parameters?
There are, you need to be moving at least one CBM, definitely to leverage this. I mean, it's not meant for parcel or something like that. It's meant for LCL sized shipments. We put some details, we need to be able to palletize. It's to be able to stack pallets is the idea there within the container. And so there are some other requirements that are in place to safeguard the other merchants in the container. We don't want to be putting dangerous goods or things that are at risk of compliance holds into the container, because that could jeopardize the deconsolidation step. If there was a customs hold on one of the merchants in the box, then you actually do need to deconsolidate. So there's a reason behind some of these criteria for what we think is good fit for this particular program. But again, I'll just restate what I said earlier. Even if it's not a perfect fit for this program, we can still help you with LCL or FCL or air freight. So yeah, there are some sort of good fit characteristics. We published some of those on the prior slide. And if you have any questions about it, you can just reach out through that link that was shared, and we can answer your particular question to make sure that you get information specific to you.
Yeah, and Ted, one CBM for those who aren't familiar with the lingo is about a pallet, right?
It's just a cubic meter. So if you talk to your supplier, they can tell you, it's like if you're ordering, they can give you the dimensions on that order. And then, if you share even just those dimensions, your carton sizes, how many cartons, we can help you back into like, is it large enough or not? So we don't want you to have to do the math yourself. You can just share with us your purchase order and the details of the cartons, and we can do the math for you.
Yeah, and I think the only merchants who I've seen that weren't shipping that much were like really small items. I've seen like some like jewelry, for example, was super small boxes and wasn't quite a fit. But most merchants are doing at least a CBM at a time.
A follow-up to that question was, do you have any other lanes besides going to the West Coast?
We do. So we also have an East Coast lane. So this goes to any of our Northeast fulfillment centers. So we're looking at Pennsylvania and New Jersey, I believe, the two states where we have those and we can reach. So this comes in through Port of Elizabeth, New Jersey, and then we can fulfill to any of those 5 in the Northeast. Future state, we'd also like to be able to cross dock and facilitate some of those different movements to the East Coast through that facility, but it's not an option right now, but we can send to any of our Northeast fulfillment centers. Now, one thing to note is that is a longer transit time, and it's a higher cost than West Coast. So you just have to weigh the pros and cons here, right? So it'll probably be cheaper to ship it directly to the East Coast, but you might lose some time. So it's completely up to the merchant how you want to utilize this program. Anything to add there, Ted?
No, we did get another question in just about the price per CBM, and just to give a quick answer on that, it does vary by month as spot rates change. So reach out to us through that link, share your cargo ready date, and some details, and we'll work you a quote very quickly.
Somebody asked, sorry if this has already been asked, do you accept shipments from India?
Not right now, but we hope to. I mean, so our goal here is to expand this to all of the origin ports and destination locations where we've got great customer overlap, where there are a lot of good Flexport customers and ShipBob customers who can essentially build that density that you need to move those containers intact. So we have a very aggressive expansion plans for this, but right now it's focused China to the US is where we're starting off, but expanding to locations like India totally makes sense.
I hope so one day. Just get everyone's inventory from everywhere. That would be ideal. Someone asked, with the substantial manufacturing backlogs and the shutdowns in China, will this impact the service?
Yeah, so we don't have any disruptions right now to the service, but I will say that there's always risk with COVID outbreaks, which we've seen happen in various port cities in China. So there were pretty difficult COVID outbreaks that affected operations in the Shenzhen Yantian area. There's currently some risk in Shanghai with an outbreak and some shutdowns. We saw the Hong Kong border close between Hong Kong and Shenzhen, which affected a lot of air freight that moves out of Hong Kong. So potential for risk, but if you're actually working with our team, that's the sort of stuff we're going to be talking to you about in real time. There's a program design, but there's also your account team, and your account team is the group that's going to be really close to news and events that could affect supply chain and be giving you real-time advice on this. So the short answer is not right now, but the longer form answer is we're always staying on top of potential disruptions and advising clients how to react to those.
A question in the chat as well. Any plans for Canada, Vancouver in the future? I assume they're saying from China to Vancouver.
Yeah, very much. That's another location that we're looking at and would like to support.
Let's see what else we've got. Where did that question go? How does the service compare to air freight?
Yeah, so air freight is faster, but a lot more expensive. So, if you're looking at sort of standard air freight transit times, you might be in the 7 to 10 day range. If you were looking at deferred, it might be closer to 12 days, something like that. But you're also looking at, 5x, 10x the price. So it's a in my opinion, an awfully good bargain to be leveraging this type of a program, which can do 15 to 17 days into FC, but at, a fraction of the price versus air freight. So it's just an amazing program if you qualify for it, and it's a good fit. But air freight's still going to be a little faster and definitely more expensive.
I don't think we have any more questions. I'll pause for a second if anyone else wants to pop them in the chat. If they're more specific, pointed questions at your business, what you guys sell, and your plans for moving inventory, I would say just use the product.shipbob.com/freightbob link that I put in the chat a couple minutes ago, and just reach out and we kind of can consult you based on what your fulfillment needs are and your supply chain needs are. Oh, I think we got another question. Nice. Thank you, guys.
I want to jump in real quick, Fran, if I could. But
yeah, go ahead.
I was thinking about the question about, shipping air freight versus ocean freight. And Ted, I was just looking in the background, and I stumbled across an article from you guys actually, and it looks like it's echoed in a few different places. But another thing to think about on whether you're using air freight versus ocean freight is that air freight produces significantly more. It's a much larger carbon footprint, right? Mm-hmm. So if you are looking at sustainability at all, if that's top of mind for you, like I know it is for a lot of our merchants, that's another thing to think about. I know in here it says that air freight generates 47 times as much greenhouse gas emissions as ocean freight per ton mile. Wow. So, next time you ship something via air when you could have sent it via ocean, just keep that in mind.
Yeah, and it's important to note that Flexport offsets all carbon from our LCL network. So, if you choose to use this program, we are offsetting the carbon impact of that. So yeah, good point, John. So there's a question here, what requirements are needed to qualify for it? Kevin, I would encourage you to reach out through that link and we can get into the details of your product. At a high level, you can think of the qualifications as saying there's a certain volume, a CBM range that's a fit. So, from 1 CBM up to, 25, 30 CBMs on the high end could potentially be the range in terms of shipment size. There are certain port pairs that we operate from. So, you would need to be able to work with us to get cargo to Shanghai, Ningbo area to be able to leverage the program right now. And then there are certain destination locations that we support through the program, all going to ShipBob's fulfillment centers. And then there are a few things that are just like more commodity specific. We want to be able to palletize the cargo. So either you palletize it or Flexport can palletize it at our origin CFS. And then we don't want to be moving commodities that have risk of customs delays or holds. So those are things like dangerous goods, or I think we gave the example of cotton from China, which is oftentimes subject to inspection or holds from customs. And there's another list of that we can go through. The easiest way is just to reach out to us, give us the details, and then we can tell you. But at just sort of the macro, it's really shipment size, commodity characteristics, and then port pairs, whether or not it's a good fit.
Great questions. I don't think we have anything else. I will pop that link to the quote page in the chat again. This recording is going to be sent out via email probably next week, just in case you had a bad internet connection or you had to pop off early or you came in late. So yeah, reach out to us through the quote page. John and his team will be happy to answer any questions as well as Ted. And then thanks so much for joining us. We're excited about this program, excited to help you guys get your inventory over faster and just have more reliable inventory in stock. So yeah, thanks for joining, and we'll see you next time on our next webinar.
Thank you all.
Thanks all.
Bye, everyone.